Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to another show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Football season is officially over now after last night's national championship game. Even though we wanted Michigan to be in that game, it was at least nice to see someone other than Alabama claim the crown. Today we're going to talk Michigan hoops. Our guest is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. First, a few news and notes to get us started. Yes, football season is over, and we are waiting to see what happens with Jim Harbaugh. A lot of national media folks claim they know what's next for Jim based on what their sources are telling them. Meanwhile, back at the ranch here in Ann Arbor, writers like Chris Ballas and John U. Bacon are saying they have no idea what Jim is going to do, and they are really connected. So let's just wait and see how it plays out. My hunch is Jim will make his decision soon. Maybe even before this show goes live tonight, you never know. So stay tuned, as they say. Now it's time to turn our attention to winter sports for a while. Most of us have been so involved with football that we have only been casually paying attention to Michigan hoops. We know the team lost some huge pieces from last year's squad, but returned Hunter Dickinson, Eli Brooks, Brandon Johns Jr., and others. Couple that with one of the best freshman classes in the country coming in this year, and we thought we would pick right up where we left off last year. Sometimes it works that way, quite often it doesn't. My guest today says as of now, Juwan Howard and his team are on the outside looking in as far as the NCAA tournament is involved. There is still time to right the ship, but a sense of urgency will be required. Joining me on our game day segment this week is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment this week is James Hawkins from the Detroit News, Michigan basketball beat writer. James, Happy New Year, and it's great to have you back talking Michigan hoops.
Yes, Happy New Year to you too, and it's good to be back.
Well, as you and I were talking about, the Michigan game was canceled on Saturday. Purdue for Tuesday, that's today when we're taping. Right now, it seems like COVID will once again be a huge concern for college basketball all winter, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're still this pandemic and still going through it, and saw last season what it was like trying to navigate through the college basketball season while playing in a pandemic, and we saw the schedules throughout the country being altered and games being postponed and delayed and all sorts of stuff. And obviously that's starting to pop up on a more regular basis now, I guess, over the last few weeks. And I mean, obviously last season Michigan went through it. They had the 2-week athletic department shut down, although the basketball team didn't have any positive cases within their program during that time. But I mean, this season, obviously Michigan, now they're dealing with their own sort of COVID outbreak. And it's led to Michigan having to postpone, 2 games at the most inopportune time, really, because these are, I mean, the home games against Michigan State and Purdue. I mean, those are games that, Michigan needs and that they want to play because, you look at what Michigan has done so far this season. I mean, their resume through non-conference play is very underwhelming. And, I mean, these are 2 games that they want to play because, I mean, they need to pick up, significant wins to improve their resume. So I just think the whole outbreak for Michigan just came at an inopportune time. And I know there's a lot of fans that are spinning conspiracy theories about Michigan ducking these opponents, but I think, these are games that, Michigan wants to play and they need to play, like I said, just because, at 7-6 and they're already on the outside looking in for the NCAA tournament. So, just this outbreak for Michigan kind of just hit it like the worst time because this was supposed to be a stretch in the season where, it could be revealing and it could have, a couple wins here and it could have, maybe changed the direction of where the season was heading for Michigan.
Well, some of my listeners seem to be confused about what's happening with the COVID scheduling, and they've been emailing me. They're wondering, are games rescheduled, postponed, or if Michigan in the end is going to have to possibly forfeit these 2 games. Do you know how that's going to work?
I don't think they'll forfeit because I think how the Big Ten with their forfeiture policy, I think when they get when teams submit that they have they're below the minimum of 7 available scholarship players, the Big Ten, they would declare it a forfeit right then. So it's if a team is below the roster minimum of 7 scholarship players, the game will be postponed and it'll either be rescheduled. But if it's unable to be rescheduled, then it would just eventually be declared a no contest. But the problem with the scheduling with this is, I mean, if you remember last season, the Big Ten, when they put out their schedules, they kind of built in those gaps where games could be made up because they thought, there was going to be postponements in games having to get rescheduled and shifted and everything. This season, that's not the case. There's not those gaps in the schedule for teams. So that's going to be the challenge moving forward. I mean, because, every week Michigan, they have 2 games scheduled already. So that's just going to be the problem is finding a gap or finding a way for these 2 games to get made up. Because like I said, obviously these are games Michigan wants to play and they need to play. They need chances to pick up, these quad 1 wins, these big wins. So who knows what's going to happen the rest of the season? There could be other programs could have outbreaks, other games could get postponed, and they could, open up a date for, Michigan to make up one of these games. But as of now, under the Big Ten's forfeiture policy, like I said, I mean, if the Big Ten made the decision to postpone the game because if it was going to be a forfeit, they've already done it. So now that they were under the minimum of scholarship players and they agreed to postpone the game, the worst outcome is that if they're not able to make up the game, that would just be declared a no contest.
Well, now that football season is over, more of the Michigan fan base is turning their attention to basketball here in January. Well aware the team has been struggling. Maybe they haven't seen a lot of the games so far. And they're probably wondering, with all of the returning talent and that great freshman class, what's going on? And how would you answer that for them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously heading into the season, the expectations were sky high. I think, Michigan was ranked, number 6 in the preseason rankings or something like that. Mm-hmm. And like you said, yeah, I mean, they have, they're returning Hunter Dickinson, who's a consensus All-American. They're returning Eli Brooks, who took advantage of the NCAA's extra year of eligibility because of the COVID outbreak. They bring in, one of the top recruiting classes in the nation, led by 5 stars, Caleb Houston and Musa Diabate. They brought in Devontae Jones, who was, many thought was going to be better than what Mike Smith was last year as another grad transfer guard. There was the hope that Brandon Johns Jr. was going to take that next step, and maybe build off, that stretch of play he had in the NCAA tournament where it was arguably the best he's played throughout his career. So I think, yeah, looking at, on paper heading into the season, I mean, it looked like Michigan had all the parts to be one of the top teams in the country. But, I mean, as we've seen over these first 2 months of the season, things just haven't come together. Just the pieces haven't really been put in place. And I think, I mean, you could sit there, you could say, what's went well for Michigan this year. I think the only thing you really point to is just that Hunter's been playing well. He's been consistently playing well. I mean, outside of that, I really don't know what else you can point to. Like I pointed to, I mean, Brandon Johns Jr. really hasn't taken that next step that many had hoped. The 2 5-stars like Caleb and Musa, they've had flashes at times, but I feel like, Caleb came in as, with a reputation for being a sharpshooter, but he's been going through some rough stretches shooting the ball. I mean, Eli, I think, Eli was good last year on last year's team. Eli's good as a 4th or 5th scoring option, but now it's he's relied upon to be more of a go-to scorer, their top scoring guard, which, is something that I don't really know if he's, built for, or, I don't know if that's the best situation for him, so to speak. And then obviously with Devontae Jones, it seems like just the transition for him, making the jump up to Big Ten plays, maybe taking longer than, Mike Smith. It took Mike Smith last season, and, he hasn't really played up to, what he's capable of or played up to the expectations many had for him throughout, the first month of the season. And then, I mean, it's right when it seems like he's starting to turn a corner. He plays well, against, Minnesota, Southern Utah, and UCF. He has that 3-game stretch. And then, you look at the last game, at Rutgers, and he, doesn't score in 31 minutes, which is not ideal. I mean, obviously they need his scoring if they're going to win. Like I said, I mean, on paper, this team has all the talent and all the pieces that you think you need in a team to win the Big Ten. But as we've seen over the first, 2 months of the season, things just haven't come together. The team just hasn't gelled. And I think, just players haven't played up to the expectations that I think, many had hoped and expected of them, heading into the year.
Well, the good thing is it's early January, and as we all know, and we've just talked about, Juwan has problems on and off the court. COVID, the problem off the court. Consistency, the problem on the court. And, it seems like when you bring a great class in or a new class to a team and then mesh them with the returning starters, it either clicks right away or it takes time for the team to mesh. And it looks like it's going to be the latter this year, isn't it?
Michigan lost, like they lost a lot of pieces from last year's team. And I mean, the thing that Juwan Howard had the luxury of, like, his first 2 seasons, is he had a lot of veterans on those teams. He had a lot of experienced players. And this year, I mean, half their roster is new faces, and it's a lot of younger people, a lot of younger players, and they'll have to get adjusted to to new roles, new situations, new teammates, a new system. So obviously that's going to take time. And yeah, like I said, I just feel like it's taken longer for just everything to gel and all these pieces to fall into place. And like I said too, like with Caleb and Musa, it's like when you get 5 stars. I mean, I think the expectation for fans is like when you see these rankings and you see like how highly rated these players are, you just feel like they're going to come in and right away they're just going to make these huge impacts. And I mean, I feel like if you just look across college basketball, I mean that's not always the case. I mean, not every 5-star comes in and just is dropping 15 points a game and is leading their team in scoring every single game. I mean, that's just, I mean, in an ideal world, I guess that would happen, but that's just not the case, and that's not the reality of what happens in college basketball. So yeah, I mean, for Juwan, like this has been a new challenge for him because, like I said, while there's a lot of experience in the starting lineup, I mean, obviously you have guys who've played a lot in Eli and Devontae. I mean, he has a lot of youth, and like the freshmen from last season who are sophomores now. I mean, they're also playing in different roles, and they're playing more than they did last year. So, like I said, it's just been a whole different challenge for Juwan to navigate. He doesn't have the luxury of having a lot of veteran players like he did his first 2 years. And now he has a younger team that he has to kind of figure out how to put everything together, figure out the best rotations, just the best units, the best groups, what buttons to push with these guys to get them to play at their best. So it's definitely been a whole new challenge for Juwan this season.
Oh, absolutely. And with the perimeter game, that's been inconsistent. I know Juwan said this week he wants guys to keep shooting. They have to build their confidence. He sees them hit these shots in practice. I mean, 34% from three-point land this year. That's respectable. But it seems like, James, when I've been able to see them play a lot of the time, when they go cold from the perimeter, it doesn't seem like, hey, it's 1 or 2 guys having off nights. It's as if the entire team goes ice cold, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those things that just seems to snowball. Like when the shots are going in, it just seems like the rim grows for everybody. And I mean, you can see what happened in the last 2 games. That's happened for the opponent. I mean, Rutgers entered that game. They were not a very good 3-point shooting team. I mean, they were, I think, one of the they ranked towards the bottom in the Big Ten and made threes per game. And I think they were averaging like 5.5 made threes per game. And I mean, within like the first 8 minutes of that game, I think they made 5 threes. And you just kind of see the effects of like once you get a couple guys just make shots early and the team just kind of gets hot right off the bat. You just see how that can kind of snowball and just trickle down. That confidence just kind of exudes, and guys just kind of feed off that. And we saw that in the game at UCF too, where was it Green and Mahan or whatever? Those guys just were unconscious and just shooting lights out from deep. But yeah, for Michigan, I feel like the 3-point shooting was like the biggest question for this team heading into the season, because obviously when you lose Franz Wagner, Isaiah Liver, Shawnee Brown, Mike Smith, you lost a ton of 3-point shooting production. I mean, heading into this year, you needed guys to fill those shoes, and obviously the one guy you had coming back who was a reliable 3-point threat was Eli Brooks. And I mean, looking at the team stats now, I mean, he's been one of the only consistent 3-point threats that they've had. I mean, Devontae Jones, I think he's shooting 45% from 3, which is good. But I mean, it's not like he's shooting at the same volume as Eli. And the thing with him too is he kind of had the same teams have kind of done the same thing defending him as we saw with Xavier Simpson when teams are daring him to shoot, they're going under screens and kind of just forcing him to kind of shoot that 3. And we saw that in the Minnesota game where he was kind of hesitant to take those shots. But I mean, if teams are going to do that, the rest of the Big Ten season, Devontae is going to have to have the confidence to step up and make those shots. And then as we've seen with like I said with Caleb Houston, he came in as with this reputation for being a 3-point threat. That was like the strength of his game. And I mean, he's gone through a couple of these tough stretches. Like he had like early on in the season, there was like a 3-game stretch where he made 1 3. He was like 1 for 14. And then, it just seems like, he was starting to turn a corner. I mean, you look at San Diego State, Nebraska, he made 4 threes in each of those games. And now you look over the last 4 games, against Minnesota, Southern Utah, UCF, and Rutgers, he's 2 for 17 from 3-point range, which isn't going to cut it. But yeah, like you alluded to, I mean, you look at Michigan's losses, and you look at what they shot from 3-point range. It just seems like in these games that Michigan's losing, they're letting their outside shooting and their 3-point shooting really determine the results of the game, whether they win or lose. And I think the only game you can say that they didn't allow that happen was the UCF game, which is where I think they made 10 threes. But I mean, you look at 4 of their worst 3-point shooting games, I think they shot 20% or worse. I mean, those were all losses. So obviously it's a troubling trend, allowing your 3-point shooting to determine whether you win or lose. But yeah, I agree with what you said. It just seems like in these games, when they go cold, it just seems like no matter who is shooting the threes, just no one can buy a bucket.
Well, we've had such strong play at point guard for, so long now. I think we're spoiled as Michigan fans. It's just been one outstanding point guard after another. And, I think fans expect that next man up kind of mentality the next year. France for Devontae Jones so far has struggled somewhat, but, when you watch this team play, sure, he could step up his game, but he's new and the rotation as a whole is struggling. So I think maybe we're putting too much on Devontae Jones, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different situation too. Like I said, I mean, fans, I think they have the expectation. Like I said, you saw what Mike Smith was able to do when he came in. It just seemed like when he stepped in, it was just like a seamless transition. But then again, I mean, just look at the talent that he had around him. I mean, he didn't come in and have to, he wasn't expected to score. I mean, he could step up. Obviously, he could score, 15 points a game or something like that. But I mean, his whole thing was he just had to come in and facilitate. I mean, you have Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, and Hunter Dickinson. They were, carrying the scoring on most nights. So it's not like, there was a lot on Mike Smith's shoulders offensively to go out and produce like every night in and night out at a high level. But with this Michigan team, I feel like there's more of an expectation for Devontae to kind of score. Like they need his scoring with this year's team. That he doesn't really have, they don't really have that type of scoring around him. Like those players that can really, carry the team. I mean, you have Hunter who's carrying the scoring on most nights and kind of doing what he's doing. But I mean, when the 3-point shots aren't going in and teams are just clogging the paint on Hunter and giving him little room to operate, you need the guards, you need the perimeter guys to knock down shots to give him more room to operate, more room to breathe down there. So yeah, I think it's just for Devontae, it was just a different situation that he's stepping into. And like I said, I just feel like it's taken him longer to kind of make that jump and make that transition, because it just seems like at times he's struggled with just like with the speed and the physical play of guys. It seems like he's just struggled to maybe penetrate the paint at times and get by guys. Other times it seems like he's not really trying to hunt his shot. It seems like he's trying to facilitate more. Just like I said, I think the thing with Devontae is that you just kind of see what the past point guards have done, and you see like how well Mike Smith did last year and kind of what he did for the team. And I feel like, when you get another grad transfer guard, the immediate thought is like, oh, he's gonna make the same type of impact, and he's gonna have this, maybe people have a higher expectation for him because there's a lot of preseason talk about that, him being an even better, point guard than Mike Smith being, the Sun Belt Player of the Year. But yeah, I just feel like, and I mean, Devontae would admit to this too. He just hasn't really played up to the level that he's capable of, and it's just taken him more time to kind of get comfortable and just kind of find his footing playing in the Big Ten and playing with this team.
Well, as I said at the top of our interview, a lot of Michigan fans are really just starting to focus on basketball after football season ended. And like many, I thought our highly ranked freshman class would have more of an impact. And I know that's not fair. As you mentioned, not every 4- and 5-star kid just drops onto the court and starts playing at an elite level. I mean, Caleb Houston we thought would be shooting better, and Moussa Diabate, he's having trouble with the transition. But you know what? From high school to Big Ten, whether you're a 3, 4, or 5-star, it just takes time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Juwan is kind of. I mean, he's kind of preached patience throughout this entire year. I mean, even after these losses, I mean, he's still confident in what this team is able to do this season. And we know with John Beilein's teams, they always got better throughout the season. And I guess that's just the hope that Michigan has this year. And yeah, and like I said, I mean, just with these young guys, you have guys that are, they're used to, being the top guy, the leading scorer on their team, and it's adjustment for these guys when they come in, and that's not entirely the case. Like I said, it's just the pieces and everything just hasn't come together. And for a guy like Caleb, like who knows when he's had rough shooting stretches like this. I mean, he might not have had these in a long time, and now it's like he runs into these these stretches where he's in a shooting slump and he's just not able to knock down, open shots. And, who knows, maybe it's his confidence is waning, and, maybe it's, the first time in a long time he's going through something like this. So there's that whole mental side. And then, with Moussa, I mean, he's like an athletic freak. And the thing that's interesting with him, though, is like he just, most of his offense and everything he does is just like he just gets offensive rebounds and scores. It's like plays aren't really being drawn up for him at all. He's just going out there and just kind of doing what he does, just bringing energy and effort on both ends of the floor. But yeah, like I said, I mean, this is just a younger team, and it's just going to take time. And the disappointing part for, I guess, a lot of fans is just that things haven't come together sooner than they had hoped.
Well, one of the things that sort of gets me crazy is watching the defense this year. You're not going to be hot every night on offense. You're not going to have it clicking, but on defense, a lot of times you can keep yourself in the game if you're playing tough D. And I know it drives Juwan crazy. So even when the offense comes around, this team has to get to a point where they're playing physical, tougher defense for 40 minutes, don't they?
Yeah, I think the two key words you hit there were physical and toughness, because that's been a thing that Eli Brooks, in a couple of these past losses, those are things that he has harped on. I mean, after the Minnesota loss, he came right out and said that they need to be more physical on defense, that they need to hit the opponent. And the problem with the defense in the last few games is that they're just letting teams get too comfortable. I mean, just look at Rutgers and UCF. I mean, you let teams kind of just start making easy shots. They get hot, and then things just start to snowball, and it's hard to stop. And then you see too, like once teams start knocking down some open shots, then the room gets bigger, and they start knocking down some of these circus shots or these tough contested, step back threes or whatever. Yeah, I mean, the defense has like the offense. I mean, it's kind of been underwhelming at times. There's been, miscommunications. There's been breakdowns. There's been defensive mistakes. I mean, you name it. They've struggled. And I mean, entering the season, I mean, several Michigan guys thought that they could be one of the best defensive teams in the country. I think even in KenPom, they were, before the season, they were ranked, number one in adjusted defensive efficiency. They were, thought to be one of the top defensive teams in the country, and it just hasn't come to fruition. I just feel like the biggest thing is that they're just letting these teams, kind of like I said, they're just not being physical enough with them. They're just letting them get into a rhythm, and they're just letting them play free. I mean, once teams kind of get in that groove, it's kind of hard to get them out of it. The last two games, Rutgers, UCF, I think the big thing has been the perimeter defense. I mean, teams weren't really shooting lights out against Michigan, the first 11 games of the season, but the last two games, that's been a glaring weakness for Michigan. So I don't have the answers, I guess, as to what it's going to take for, this team to buckle down on the defensive end. But yeah, like I said, it's just kind of been a disappointment just because, like I said, several players thought that this team, had the pieces and the potential to be one of the best defensive teams in the country, but it just hasn't shown at all so far through these first 2 months of the season.
Last week, Juwan said he sees his team on the brink of a major turnaround, and you wonder if that's coach speak. He really has to say that, but you watch them every night. Do you get that kind of feeling that they're just that close?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, Juwan he's going to stay positive. I mean, that's the one thing you have to do. I mean, he's just trying to, build confidence, and I mean, he's not going to sit there and start, pointing fingers at his guys when things aren't going good. The problem I feel like with Michigan this season is just like it seems like every time they take a step forward, the next game they take a step back. It's like they just haven't been able to consistently play well game after game. It just seems like they play well one game, and then it's, the next game something happens that just sets them back. It's like early on maybe they're struggling with turnovers, and then the next thing it's like, teams are just shooting lights out from three-point range. I mean, just based off what we've seen so far this season, I don't know. I haven't seen anything that's going to tell me that they're going to turn things around. But like I said, who knows what would have happened? I mean, you have these, if the game against Michigan State doesn't get postponed, I mean, rivalry games, I mean, we all know you can throw the records and the rankings and all that stuff out because, I mean, there's going to be the intensity that obviously Michigan's going to come out and give everything they got, and they're going to have the advantage of home court. Who knows? Maybe they win that game. That could just spark them. They could just turn the season around right there. So it's hard to say, but I mean, just based off what we've seen from this team so far this year, I don't think that. I mean, as of now, I don't think that they have what it takes to be a tournament team. But like I said, a lot of things can change. I mean, who knows? Maybe they start finally knocking down outside shots. Maybe Caleb Houston starts knocking down, like 4 or 5 threes a game consistently, and then that starts opening things up for Hunter. I mean, it just takes one win to turn things around for this team, but just based off what we've seen from this team so far, it just seems like there's a lot of troubling trends and troubling issues with this team. And I think one of the biggest things is just the lack of three-point shooting. I mean, they've had a couple of games where they shot well from three, but that seems more of a mirage than it did like that they were starting to turn things around. So, But yeah, just based off what I've seen from this team so far this season, I think I don't think at this point in the season that they're going to be a tournament team. But like I said, it just takes one game, maybe one of these games against a top 10 opponent or a ranked team that can maybe just spark things and turn things around.
Oh, absolutely. Final question for you, James, before we let you get away. We know Juwan Howard and his staff, they're not going to panic. He's going to stay positive. He's just that kind of a coach. But do you think maybe it's at this point in the season, January, the way things have gone so far, time for a sense of urgency if this team wants to reach some of their goals?
Oh, for sure. I mean, definitely time is running out. I mean, you're running out of time to turn your season around. I mean, like I said, Juwan, he keeps expressing confidence and he keeps, saying that, he trusts that the team will get better. But I mean, at a certain point, the team has to show it. I mean, you're a game above 500, at 7-6, and you don't even have a single quad one win on your resume. I think they only have one quad two win. They're, I think, overall 1-6 in quad one and quad two games, which isn't going to get it done. And yeah, I mean, you can, like I said, you can say, that you feel like, this team is capable of great things and they're capable of, going on a run and, that they're not hitting the panic button yet. But I mean, at a certain point, I mean, once you're getting here, I mean, middle of January, you got to start showing results. I mean, there's got to be more actions than words at that point. Because yeah, I mean, they're running out of time to kind of turn things around. I mean, if they get off to a bad start here in Big Ten play, it's going to be hard to turn things around. And I mean, obviously, if they want to make the tournament, you got to start picking up some quality wins. And who knows? I mean, even if they go 10-10 in Big Ten play, who knows if that's even going to be good enough for them to make the tournament? Just because, like I said, their non-conference schedule, I mean, the only good win they have is San Diego State. So, I mean, you got to hope that San Diego State plays well the rest of the season, so that one kind of holds up. But yeah, I mean, you can only sit here and say that you think the team is going to get better. You're trusting they're going to get better, and you think they're capable of good things. But I mean, at a certain point, the team has to start showing it. And up to this point in the season, the Wolverines haven't.
Well, again, the good thing is there's plenty of time left, and we get this COVID situation under control. Maybe get a big win against the Illini, and one game might turn the tide. We shall see, but it's going to be interesting. Here with us today on our Game Day segment has been beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. And again, James, great to get you back talking Michigan hoops, and I'm sure we will have you back soon. So again, thank you for your time.
All right, sounds good. Take it easy, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, once again, no news on the Jim Harbaugh situation. My guess is we'll hear from him in the next few days. In other news on the Michigan athletic scene, the number 11 ranked University of Michigan women's basketball team, 13-2 overall, 4-1 in the Big Ten, hits the road for the first of two straight games away from Chrysler this week, heading to Penn State for a Thursday evening contest at 8 p.m. The game will be broadcast live on the Big Ten Network. The game will feature two of the top four scorers in the Big Ten, in Naz Hillman at 20 points per game, and Penn State's McKenna Marissa, 21.7 per game. They are two of the four players in the Big Ten averaging at least 20 points per game. Michigan will do battle on Sunday at number 8 Maryland. Tip time is 5 p.m. If Juwan Howard's team gets clearance, they will resume action on Friday night against the Fighting Illini down in Champaign-Urbana. Tip time is 9 p.m. Let's hope they can play, because if they cannot, their schedule is going to be brutal in February and March. Hockey will be home at Yost this weekend, coming off a big sweep of number 10 UMass last weekend. Penn State will be in town for Friday and Saturday night games. Michigan is 7-5 in Big Ten play, 16-6-1 overall. It's nice to think warm thoughts right now, especially with the frigid weather we are experiencing in southeast Michigan. Michigan softball practice is getting underway, and they open the season down in Florida 1 month from now, believe it or not. On February 11th, they begin play in the USF tourney with games against Kansas City, Illinois State, Florida, and host USF. It's just around the corner. Baseball will begin practice next week in preparation for opening the season on February 18th in the College Baseball Showdown. That will take place in Arlington, Texas. They will face Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma, UT Arlington, and Florida International. Games will be played starting on February 18th, and the tourney will conclude on February 21st. In a final note, congratulations to Michigan great Mark Messner for being named to the Football Hall of Fame. Mark was a great defensive lineman for us from 1985 to 1988. The Detroit CC grad started 49 games in his Michigan career. He was a two-time first-team All-American in 1987 and 1988. He is also one of only 3 players in Big Ten history to be named first-team All-Big Ten in 4 seasons. So congratulations, Mark. We hope to get him on the show this winter.
and talk about his great career and, of course, get his thoughts on this past season. That will do it for now, though. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!